Welcome, everybody, to Lunch with GreenTown. This is a 5-week series on environmental topics of interest. GreenTown is your local environmental group founded over 10 years ago, and we have been doing a lot of tree planting lately, and biking is very important to us. I lead bike tours. I did the first bike tour of historic homes in Los Altos, starting in, I did that in 2012, so I've been leading bike rides ever since of different types. And then the other thing we like to do is work with the schools, the WOW program, which is pretty nicely embedded in the school system now, but we work with them. And that's been quite successful, getting kids to bicycle to school and walk to school and carpool. And the counts, we do counts with the school district, and they have been going up nicely. So that's all good. So things can be done. We also have a summer internship program, and I'm looking forward to doing that again. It's always fun to work with the next generation, like Sarah. So these talks take about 1 hour. There's time for questions. Use the chat box to ask your questions. And as you know, these are being recorded, well, eventually be posted on the GreenTown YouTube channel. I'd like to make a big shout out to the Parks and Rec Department for helping me put this series together, and also to the Sereno Group. They provided funds for our outreach with a grant from their 1% for Good, the Climate and Culture Fund. Now, Shiloh is our speaker, Shiloh Ballard, and she is the executive director for Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, but she's done a lot more than that. She's worked with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, helped direct that organization's housing, transportation, and land use policy. This work helped us get better green building policies and stronger affordable housing policies. So those are all two things that are very important to all of us. Me, I enjoy hearing about that too. So thank you, Shiloh. Now, tell us about biking.
Excellent. And thank you for welcoming here and giving me the opportunity to talk about this. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. There we go. Everybody can see that. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Yay. And let me just adjust this so that you all are not blocking my screen. Okay, so as Gary said, my name is Shiloh Ballard. I run the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. For those of you who aren't familiar with the coalition, our purpose is to improve the community, economy, and environment through the everyday use of the bicycle. And we do that in two different ways. We focus on lobbying so that we can get better street design and infrastructure in place. And then we also do that through fun programs, because we know that when each and every one of us is born into a society that idolizes the car, even if we have gold-plated bike lanes, we still don't ride. So we need that cultural, behavioral change stuff that will help move us along. Another thing to note, we cover 2 counties. We cover Santa Clara County and San Mateo County. That's 35 cities and towns, which is a lot of different personalities in terms of cities and towns, how they go, and a lot of different places that these different cities are in their evolution towards a pro-bike world, Biketopia. So anyway, that's a real quick synopsis of the Bike Coalition. Of course, I have to put in a shameless plug. We're a nonprofit. If you like to bike, we have a membership, and you spend $35 a year, which is a floor, not a ceiling. And you support the organization that's out there trying to make the roads safe for families and kids to be out riding their bikes. So what I'm gonna talk about today is some public opinion research that we did about a year ago. We did it right before COVID hit. So this is quite possibly, maybe not even quite possibly, but this is kind of the last snapshot of the transportation, people's attitudes towards transportation before everything changed. I wanted to tell you why we did this. We in the bike movement, and I'd be curious to know if people want to put in the chat, why they've come to be here today, if you're an avid bicyclist or if you just care about active transportation or sustainable modes of transportation. We in the bike movement started out as, your typical scrappy nonprofit, and a bunch of people who had some passion around an issue and wanted to do something about it. And over the, when we were thinking about, well, how do we make the world a better place by getting more people to ride bikes for everyday use? We all think about it in terms of how we came into it, what worked for us. And so our policies and our programs are structured around kind of that instinct of like, well, this worked for me in getting me to ride a bike, so it's probably going to work for other people. And that's fine. It's, we've been pedaling along. But as we've been professionalizing, we've had this desire to really have more of a data-informed approach. I certainly don't want to spend my entire life working to get more people to ride bikes and find at the end of the day that the programs we have don't actually work. So basically, we had been seeking funding for a while to just benchmark people's attitudes towards transportation, for two reasons. One is, and I'm going to admit this person from the waiting room. One is so that we can track our progress and how those attitudes may or may not change over time. So if people are saying, gee, I'm too afraid to go out and ride my bike, and they keep saying that, the same number of people say it year after year, then we know, well, we're not really making progress. We're not changing, because we know that people's top barrier to riding a bike is they're afraid. So if that attitude isn't changing over time, then we know we need to change our strategy. There's something we're not doing right. So we wanted to benchmark those attitudes and see if they're changing over time. And then the other reason we wanted to do this polling, and this is probably a lot more obvious, is we want to use it to inform policy and understand specifically the different attitudes across demographics. How do men feel about something, and how do women feel about something? How do people who are over 65 feel about bicycling versus younger people? How do people who have, are of Asian ancestry of some sort, do they view bicycling differently? Do white people view bicycling in a certain way? We wanted to get a better sense of all this so that we can tailor our outreach and messaging. So we partnered with an organization called Change Research. This is an organization that is trying to they are revolutionizing, or they have revolutionized the field of polling. You might, if you think about polling, we used to completely rely on landlines, and we can't do that so much anymore. So what does that mean for polling? What does that mean for the accuracy of polling? The guy who founded Change Research, it was one of the first data scientists at LinkedIn. And so he's just been, fiddling around trying to figure out how can we do polling accurately today, given that most people are on a cell phone and they're on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it may be. And then the other piece of this that I want to mention is that we partnered with the Mineta Transportation Institute out of San Jose State University. They did the analysis once the poll was done. So at the end of the day, we surveyed 1,000 people in Santa Clara County. These are all types of people, not just people who ride bikes, but it's a statistically valid and representative sample of people who live in Santa Clara County. And I think I can't remember if I mentioned, but it was funded by the County of Santa Clara through the Public Health Department. All right, so that's the background on the poll. Now I'm going to get into some of the questions we asked and the data.
So Shiloh, let me interrupt.
Yeah.
You gave us a little teaser there that we aren't able to use landlines anymore. So what did you use?
I should have told you that. Sorry. So Change Research has concluded that polling people through Facebook is the way that they're going. So all of this was done. They seek out people and a representative sample through Facebook, and they'll push it out. and then they'll assess, does this look like a representative sample? If it doesn't, then they'll push it out to a certain segment of Facebook users to get more people in that demographic. But it's done through Facebook.
Nice.
Yep. So, and folks, change research has become, the other piece of change research, the reason they wanted to do this is they wanted to make polling more accessible and affordable. The average poll costs $25,000 to $30,000, and change research is a lot less than that. So it opens up polling to smaller candidates, smaller issues, nonprofits like us. The other thing is the guy who founded Change Research is an avid bicyclist. So that's how we first got introduced. All good people ride bikes. Okay, so, and Gary, I'm gonna rely on you to cut me off when it's time to switch to questions, because for some reason I'm not able to see the time on my computer.
I'm sure we're gonna enjoy you no matter how much time you take.
Yeah, just feel free to interrupt and cut me off. Okay, so first thing we wanted to get a sense of is, why do people actually make the transportation decisions that they make? So we just asked a broad question, what are the factors you use in choosing how you're going to transport yourself? Whether it be the car or the bike or public transit or walking, whatever it may be, carpooling. So you can see here the answers. You can see what the ones that got the most votes are. And not a surprise to anybody that speed is the number one determinant of how we choose how we're going to transport ourselves. What was interesting is that the next one was safety from crime. And that is actually distinct from safety from traffic crashes. And you'll see ease of use is in there. If you've got to map out a route on your bike, or you've got to figure out the bus route, it's not as easy to use. People just want to get in their car and plug it into, some mapping software that they use and be off, and do so quickly. For the purposes of this group, the depressing piece of news you'll see third up is concern for the environment. You'll see that isn't necessarily something people think about at a large scale when they're determining how they want to transport themselves. So there you have it. Also, non-stressful is pretty high up there, but concern for the environment, financial cost, and physical activity, those aren't really things that register for people at the same levels that the other ones do. Hold on one sec. All right. Here's an interesting piece of data. We're asking people, we're trying to get a sense of, do people like driving? Do they like the transportation system that we're currently, more or less trapped into? So we asked folks, do you drive a car more than you would like to drive a car? And you'll see here overall, about 50% said, yep, I drive a car more than I would like to drive a car. But when you start to drill down and understand the differences between different demographics, generally speaking, women, the difference between women and men, and whether they because we also asked a question, do you wish you could drive more, or do you like driving a car? And there was a pretty significant difference between men and women. Women basically are like, I don't like driving. I wish I didn't have to drive a car as much. And men are like, yeah, I don't mind. I like my car. I don't mind driving. And for me, it's interesting because it causes me to think about, what would our transportation system have looked like if women had been the ones who really designed the system and determined what kind of, how we were going to be getting around. And it's not to say that women would have said, let's all ride bicycles, but this data does indicate that we might not have ended up with the car.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One question for you, Shiloh.
Yeah.
I know we're recording this, and so people can look at these slides to watch the recording, but will you share the slides otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send them to you, Gary. Also, at some point, I'll put in the chat, or maybe Gary, and when you follow up with folks, you can send out the link. But on our website, we have a landing page with all of there's 3 links. One is to the academic report that the Minetta Transportation Institute did on this data. Another are about 100 more pretty slides like this that you can, maybe not 100, but probably about 50 slides like this. I've just chosen my favorites. And then the other is the raw data. So if you want to just like nerd out on the data, it's all up there on our website for you to play with. Beautiful. And it really is fun. Yep. Yep. Okay, so now we get into questions about bicycling. And you'll see here we have two main columns here that we're interested in. You know, from the Bike Coalition's perspective, we're mainly interested in, you know, what our goal is really to get people out riding for daily use, to the library, to the grocery store, for utilitarian purposes. We love that people ride recreationally, and we're absolutely about recreational cycling, but really we're trying to make this a lifestyle and get people out of cars. So you'll see here we asked people, you know, do you ride to a destination? And we asked people, do you ride for recreation? And you'll see here that there are differences between all these different demographic groups. There's one of the big differences you'll notice is on recreational riding. There's a pretty big difference between men and women. There's also a difference there for older folks. They ride recreationally a lot more and not for utilitarian purposes. There's a difference definitely on the recreational cycling side of things between white people and then folks of Latinx origin or Asian origin. And then the thing that I really like to highlight, I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom, is when you break things out by geography, you'll see that on the utilitarian bicycling side of the equation, when you're in more of an urban area like central San Jose, that's the top one, ridership is a lot higher. And North County, same thing. So we're talking about Palo Alto, Mountain View. And in particular, you all are probably pretty familiar with the fact that Palo Alto has invested a lot into their Safe Routes to Schools programs, and there's a huge ripple effect out of that. And then Mountain View has a pretty strong employer community that is essentially required to be getting folks to not drive solo to the North Bayshore area. So these factors are important in determining ridership levels. And the reason I point this out is because it's pretty clear here, and we knew this, but you can see it here, that land use matters. It is really important how you are building your community. If you're building out in Gilroy and it's more of an urban area where things are spread out, people aren't going to ride, they're not going to take public transit. It's just too far, and they need to get to where they're going fast. Again, going back to that first slide. But if you're in more of an urban area, like San Jose and downtown San Jose, or like Palo Alto, which is a little more urban and set up so that people can ride their bikes everywhere, you see it translates. So land use really matters. And this speaks to, for us at the Bike Coalition, when we're determining, we've got a limited amount of resources, limited amount of staff, and we cover 35 cities and towns, where should we be focusing those resources? Should we go out to the areas where there is a really low ridership rate and the land use is basically set up to be incredibly challenging for us to get people to ride? Or should we double down on those areas where the land use is set up to facilitate walking and biking?
And so far,
say again?
And the answer is?
The answer is to focus on the place where the land use is already helping us get there.
It makes sense.
That's our conclusion at this point. All right. So speaking of, we asked folks a couple of statements. We asked them how much they agree with these kinds of statements. And I like to highlight the top one and the bottom one. The top one asks, many of the places I need to go are close enough to reach by bicycle. And for the most part, people are like, not really. You know, if I got to go somewhere, whether it's dropping my kids off at school or soccer practice or whatever, these different places I need to go work, it's too far. And the reason I like to highlight this one is because that may be the case, but we suspect in the bike movement that for many people, this is a perception that is not grounded in reality. And that's the reason we organize things like open streets events like Viva Calle and Bike to Work Day, or this year and going forward, Bike to Wherever Day and Bike to Wherever Month. Because what these programs do is, you know, in one day, Bike to Work Day, it's that one day where it's like, just try it. Just try riding your bike to work. And with Viva Calle, the Open Streets program in San Jose, you know, ride your bike that 6 miles down to the start and finish. And what ends up happening, and for those of you who are bicyclists, what you see is if you've ever staffed an Energizer station at Bike to Work Day, you have people who have never ridden their bike to work, and they're like, I'm going to do that 7-mile ride to work or that 6-mile ride to work. And they arrive with this big smile on their face because they realize they can do it. And that 6 miles or 7 miles actually isn't that hard. So this question here, many of the places I need to go are close enough to reach by bike. We have a little bit of skepticism in the bike community that
Lost you. Shiloh? Right in mid-sentence.
Frozen.
She's still showing. There's a green box with a, here, okay, here we go. Let's try again. I'm waiting for her to come back.
Oop. Hello, sorry about that. I think, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, let me restart this.
Share screen.
Yep. All right, I'm not sure when I cut out, but I'll talk about the last slide here that said, I mean, the last question here. I know several people like me who routinely bicycle to get around. Again, this speaks to our programmatic work like Bike to Work Day and Viva Calle Open Streets programs, because who you're around really matter. If your friends and family are doing things, you're more likely to do it. And so Bike to Work Day is that one day where we're normalizing it. And we're like, everybody's doing it. You are completely normal today to show up sweaty, a little bit smelly. It's totally okay because everybody's that way. So the data here shows that is the case. We need to normalize this behavior. We need to make sure that there are more people doing it, so that then more people do it.
So when you cut out, you were talking about that top line and that you're skeptical about the results about people need to be close enough to reach by bicycle.
Yeah, so just a real quick recap, since I'm not sure how much you missed, but we believe that's a perception and not a reality in many cases, because there are programs like Bike to Work Day and Viva Calle, the Open Streets programs, where it's like, hey, come out and ride this 6 miles. And when people do it, they have in their mind, riding to work 6 or 7 miles is too far. Like that's just too far. And so Bike to Work Day says, just try it. Just this one time, just try it this one time. And they do it, and they arrive with a big fat smile on their face because they're like, I can do it. I rode 6 or 7 miles. And so this.
So the results here on this top line or before they've done that one time to try it out. This will be a different answer after that day. Okay.
Yep. So for us, it reinforces that this is those kinds of programs to get people to try it are the right kinds of programs, because we know, we know that after they do it, they realize they can do it. They realize that they are close enough to ride by bike.
Well, the other side of that is getting the kids to ride their bikes to school. That creates a lifetime habit, we hope.
Exactly. And you just fed into my next slide.
Oh, sorry.
So on the right side here, I'm not going to talk about the left side. The right side, basically, we asked people, did you ride as a preteen? And those who said yes rode, at higher levels than, if you remember that first slide, which is more, closer to 5-6% of folks ride for everyday use. But if you rode as a preteen, you're closer to 10% likely to be riding today. But the important part here, and this is significant for our Safe Routes to Schools work, is that if folks rode as a preteen and then kept riding as a teenager, they're even more likely to ride as an adult. So you'll see that 16%. And the way that Safe Routes to Schools programs are set up right now is typically we invest in elementary schools. And then once kids go into junior high and high school, we stop trying to get them to ride. And what this data shows is we should probably rethink that. We need to be, it's important to have our Safe Routes to Schools programs in the elementary schools, but if there's a way that we can be, elongating that out into our middle schools and high schools, it's going to have a bigger impact in terms of adult transportation behavior.
Is that something that you're working on then, trying to make that happen?
It is. It is.
Well, we've got a couple of teens in the audience. If you want to put in the chat box whether you ride your bike to school, and if you think others would, please do that.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so this is also one of my favorite slides. We're trying to get a sense of like, okay, we know that we have to get people to change their behavior because we're going to make the planet inhabitable for human life. And so at the same time, when we make these difficult decisions that make cars less advantageous, people freak out. So we asked them questions like, hey, in your community, do you need more lanes for cars? And people are like, oh yeah, we do. We need lots more lanes for cars. I want to get in my car and drive wherever, unimpeded. And we said, okay, well, what about parking? Do you need more parking for your cars? And people are like, oh yeah, I need more parking. Give me more parking. I want to drive right up to wherever I'm going. I want to park right in front of it. I want to not have to walk more than 2 steps. And I want to get my latte and then go out to my car and be on my way. But then we asked the question, what about speed limits? Are speed limits posted too slow? Meaning, are people going too fast, or should we slow people down? And in comparison to those other policy suggestions, people said, you know what? Yeah, cars drive too fast. It's not safe. We need to slow people down. So that's hopeful in our minds because, first of all, I should say we have to make the difficult decisions. Even if people want more car parking, we have to make it less convenient for people to drive, which means making it harder to park. That just has to happen. And our city council members, our town council members have to make those difficult decisions, even though they face a council chamber full of angry constituents who are going to vote them out of office. That needs to happen. But the hopeful part is that people are open to slowing speeds. And when it comes to street safety, that is like the key piece. Speed kills. If people are going fast in their cars, people on bikes don't feel safe and they won't ride. So there is a political opening there for that kind of policy change to slow down speeds and make the streets more safe for bicyclists. Okay, so this one is trying to understand, what would it take to get people to ride or ride more? And so we asked people the question. We said, would you ride more if, and then the ifs were, it was kind of a social activity, you were riding with friends and family. If your employer gave you an incentive of some sort, like they paid you a certain amount of money a week. If your doctor said, hey, you know what, you should probably be getting more exercise and you should ride your bike more. Would you ride more if the streets were more safe? And then the last one we asked, would you ride more if you had access to classes that taught you how to ride more safely and improved your bike confidence that way? And you'll see that safety is the one that everybody's like, if the streets were more safe, I would ride more. And that's something that we already knew. It's the biggest barrier. And then what was interesting is that classes didn't necessarily fare as well. But social, like riding with friends, if you had a group of people that you rode to work with for social purposes to get there, then people are more likely to ride. The one thing that I wanted to point out also is that we looked a little bit more at classes as a way of getting more people to ride. And again, when you slice and dice this data demographically, there's a huge difference between men and women. Women say, yeah, a class would really help me. I would like to take a class and boost my bike confidence. And men are like, nah, I got this. I don't need no class. I can do it just fine. All right, getting to the end here. Actually, I'm going to skip that one. This also is one of my favorite ones. We asked people, like, what kind of bike facility do you feel safe on? And, not surprisingly, everybody says, I would ride if I had my own path, a nice trail, a nice paved trail. I would ride a lot. And we also asked them, well, what about, your conventional bike lane, that little skinny white line? And when we were polling, we showed them pictures so they could see actually what we were talking about. But you've got a conventional bike lane with a skinny white line. And how would you feel with a conventional bike lane and cars next to you and the lanes next to you going 45 miles an hour? And people universally were like, no, I don't feel safe there. I do not want to ride in those circumstances. And we said, well, okay, same thing. But what about if cars were going 35 miles an hour? And it ticks up a little bit. And we asked them, what about 25 miles an hour? And it ticks up a little bit there too. But you'll see here, people still really don't feel safe in your typical conventional bike lane with a skinny white line. So then we asked them, what about a parking buffered bike lane, or a buffered bike lane, or something where you have a physical barrier like bollards or something between you and traffic? And you'll see here, it goes up significantly. It's still not nearly as close as the off-street path. But one of the reasons I highlight this is in advocacy, in as much as we know that off-street trails are going to be the key piece of infrastructure that entices people to get on a bike, the reality is it's incredibly difficult to get trails built. It's time consuming and it's very costly. And again, as a bike coalition, a small nonprofit with limited resources, where can we get the biggest bang for our buck? Where are we going to focus on getting the most number of relatively safe feeling bike infrastructure out most quickly? And our conclusion is it's protected bike lanes and buffered bike lanes. And the idea being, we want to create the feeling of a trail using the on-street network. We can get a lot more bike lanes built that way than if we were to invest all of our time in getting paths. And so here
there's a lot of perception involved here in terms of what people think is safe. So do you have any way of knowing what really makes people feel safe? In other words, a lot of this stuff has been done. We've got bike lanes that have bollards. So when you put those in, did more people bike?
Yeah, the answer is yes, they do. There's plenty of academic research out there that shows that. But I think that's a good point, and it speaks to this slide. You're setting me up perfectly here, Gary.
Well, we're on the same page almost.
So one of the things you can see here is there's a line here, the second line here, that says people who bicycle in an average week. So these are people who ride regularly. So you would imagine they're comfortable, and you can see here their numbers are quite a bit higher than everybody else's numbers. And so what this says, and this again speaks to the programmatic aspect of what the Bike Coalition does. You can put in the bike infrastructure, you can put in the bollards, but people still need someone to take them by the hand, throw the leg over the bike for them, take them on a bike ride so that they can actually experience it and feel it and ride with someone who's comfortable and learn by doing. And so again, the programmatic stuff, Bike to Wherever days, Viva Calle, just going on social rides. We organize all sorts of social rides. Let's go ride to the ice cream shop. Let's go ride to the coffee shop, so that people can do it with others who are very comfortable, and then get comfortable by being around people who know what they're doing. So, you'll see that bears out here in the numbers, and you see differences again between men and women and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, did that answer the question, Gary?
It does.
Yeah. So that's basically all. There's lots of more data, lots of excellent stuff to talk about. We tested questions like, do people not ride because they perceive that it's not hip? All sorts of that kind of data that you can nerd out on if you want. But key takeaways. So again, there are real demographic differences, mainly between women and men, and with specific cultural overlays, and we need to pay attention to those things and tailor how we're structuring our programs and infrastructure. And then also, again, speaking to the point that I was making earlier, if we want people to ride, we have to slow down cars and create the feel of a trail through buffered and protected bike lanes. And then distance and trip speed matters, which means land use matters. We need to be planning our communities so that you can get to wherever you're going by bike or by foot in 15 minutes. So with that, I will.
Shiloh, I think that's a great concluding comment, because here in Los Altos this year, we're redoing the bicycle pedestrian master plan. And the same year, we're going to have another shot at the housing element, which has a lot to do with the zoning in Los Altos. So this is really a big year for this kind of conversation. So I'm glad that you were able to help us out. And clearly there are a lot of things that can be done to encourage people to get on a bike. And I think we at GreenTown we realize that without maybe realizing it, but because we take people on bike rides all the time. I think we work with the schools and work with the kids, getting them on bikes, being comfortable on a bike. And I can see that this is an area where we need to really do more.
Absolutely.
So this is a small enough group, so I'm not going to be hard-nosed about it, but if somebody wants to jump in there and ask a question, go ahead.
Any questions? There were two questions in the chat. One person mentioned the need for showers, and it's interesting. We did a focus group with VTA, gosh, about 4 years ago, where we were asking them these questions like, why don't you ride? What would help you ride more? And a couple folks said, there are showers at VTA, but the shower curtain is really gross. So I don't want to use the shower. And that's preventing me from riding my bike to work. And VTA was like, well, that's like a $3 solution. They just needed to get new shower curtains, and they did. So yeah, whoever wrote that, you're absolutely right. Showers are important. When we're working with companies and they go through our bicycle friendly development guidelines, we're always saying, hey, you should provide showers. We also emphasize that companies.
This is Heather.
We also emphasize that companies should create a culture that doesn't put as much emphasis on like needing to be squeaky clean. Like, it's okay if you look a little frumpy, because we did ask that question. I didn't cover it in the slide deck, but we asked people, You know, is riding your bike, do you get too sweaty to be then, you know, to be able to ride to work? Or do you need to dress in ways that riding a bike to work prevent you from doing that? And
Hey, Shiloh, this is Heather Durham. I'm the one that commented on that. I'm also one of the past founders of the U.S. Green Building Council in Silicon Valley. We've met several times, and I do a local TV show. So I would never shower at VTA. I was talking about more companies putting showers in their facilities. That was the comment. Like I would never shower at VTA, but
Even
some
with
companies have made
curtains.
no, I would never shower in a public place like that. But companies, there are some companies like Adobe and, you know, Apple, Netflix, different places that have, you know, made the effort to put in showers at their facilities. So I was talking more about like that. Anyway.
Yeah, so I covered that, but I wanted to go back to just finish my thought on, you know, it's okay for a company to create a culture that is more welcoming of folks who don't have to be dressed to the nines. And when we asked that question in our survey, there's a split between different cultures, different ethnicities, and different genders, and in particular, different age groups. People who are more mature in the workforce are less concerned with looking, you know, conventionally professional. And if you're younger, and so one could conclude that as a younger professional, you're trying to make more of an impression, so you're showing up looking better than the older folk who, you know, are more mature in their career.
So Shiloh, this is Margie. We actually did a little work together back in for Sierra Club a while back. I wanted to check with you or ask if you would comment on some of the local economic development benefits of cycling, because I feel like, particularly now, people are very concerned about local businesses, and there's so much interesting information about cycling and local economic development.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. Yeah, there's all sorts of wonderful marketing and academic research out there under the moniker of bikes mean business. But you know, it's as simple as when you're on a bike, it's just you're seeing things in a different way. You're just much more likely to stop and spend money. And that's part of the point of big festivals like Viva Calle, is to get people out of their car onto the street, riding by these local businesses that then bring their business out onto the sidewalk, so that people can be like, oh my gosh, I never knew that taqueria was there, I'm going to go there. Or I never knew that ice cream shop was good there, I'm going to go there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a huge benefit from an economic development perspective to people living life joyfully by the bike. Joe.
Shiloh, thank you very much for your presentation. I'll be showing my age, but I rode a bicycle to high school for 4 years when I was the only kid that rode a bike, quite often finding it up the flagpole. I also commuted or tried to commute from the southern end of Los Altos when Foothill Expressway first opened to Page Mill Road, where my company was located. That was a nice ride, except I was petrified of being stopped by the police because it was illegal in those early days of doing it. My question to you is this. I presently live up in the hills, so for me to go down to Safeway to get some milk and come back home on the bike is a 45-minute round trip with a very significant climb at the end. Now, do you have any statistics, and this is the safety perception question. I ride the bicycle up and down Moody Road all the time. And unfortunately, in the last 10, 15 years, with people texting or staring at their phones, there have been so many cars that are wandering on the road, unlike my perception being 20, 30 years ago when I was doing the same thing. Everybody was were quite good drivers. Now it is very frightening to ride up and down Moody Road in traffic. Do you have any statistics relating to that? Because where I'm going with this is the whole concept of having completely isolated bicycle lanes, completely separated from traffic, and the insistence that traffic drives slower. I personally don't believe it's practical to tell people on Foothill Expressway you can now drive 25 miles an hour instead of the 45 or 50 they're presently doing.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Oh,
the
yeah,
question.
yeah. And yeah, no, you're right. There are locations, expressways and freeways where that's where cars are designated to go fast. And we tend to basically say to folks, like, if you're a confident cyclist, then go ahead and ride Central Expressway or Foothill. But for the people who are less confident, we need to figure out what are the ways that we can pull them out. And what does that infrastructure look like? I mean, one place that you may not anticipate where I was going to take your comment and question is, distracted driving is a big thing. It's a big problem, and combine that with speeding and bigger cars with their grills, designed in such a way that visibility is very poor on some cars. These are things that are absolutely within our control. And when I say our, I mean society, not as an individual. But if we really cared about street safety, and many of you probably know that 40,000 people die on our roads every year in the US. It's a top 10 cause of death. And for people up to the age of 25, it is the #1 cause of death, dying on our roads. Those are people in cars, on a bike, on their foot. Our roads are one of the most dangerous places to be. If we really wanted to do something about that, we could create the technology within our phones that prevent us from playing with our phone while we're driving, right? We absolutely could do that if we really wanted to make the streets more safe. And that would take a lot less time than putting in a protected bike lane, probably. And that's a matter of, pushing on public policymakers to take on, the big companies that are making phones and profiting off of our phones. But texting while driving, we could make it so that the phone is disabled while you're moving. We could make it so that the phone tracks if you're going above the speed limit and you automatically this stuff, we have the technology capability to make the roads more safe. We just choose not to.
Thank you.
Jeff, I see your hand up. And it's good to see you, Jeff.
Shiloh, it's so wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for this. A couple of things that you haven't talked much about, and I think they're related, but electric bikes are changing everything. I mean, I bike for exercise, but I'm still excited about the prospect of getting one of those because I think I'll ride more. And there was a really good article that I sent around to everybody that was just today in Utility Dive about how transformative electric bikes are in some city centers. But related to that, of course, is the effort to reduce greenhouse gases. And although that may not show up on a lot of people's minds with regard to your survey data, we're looking at how we can fund or incentivize people to get electric bikes. I think, people 65 plus a lot more people are gonna ride these things once they see how fun and easy they are. So please talk about those two things a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because when Joe was asking his question about him living up in the hills, I thought, oh, we need to talk about e-bikes, and then it left my brain. So thank you for bringing me back to that. No, you're absolutely right. The e-bike is an equalizer. It can help people, make that distance shorter in terms of, oh, I've got to climb at the end to get up to this hill. And also going back to the people answering the question, oh, I would arrive to work too sweaty. Riding an e-bike helps with that as well, because you might not have to sweat. You can just put it in high gear and you're going. So the e-bike can solve a lot of problems. You're absolutely right. You guys probably know, because you're environmentally minded folks, that our CCAs are coming up with e-bike rebate programs. We actually at the Bike Coalition have a contract with Peninsula Clean Energy to be helping them with their e-bike program. So teaching classes, helping people understand how to buy an e-bike, how to feel comfortable on an e-bike, and then in particular getting the word out about this e-bike rebate program into communities who might not necessarily on the natural take advantage of an e-bike rebate program. So yep, absolutely right.
So I like the direction here. It looks like, you know, the environment wasn't big on your list in terms of what people thought was important to get out there and ride a bike. I ride a bike because I think it's fun and I just enjoy it. And probably little short daily trips don't amount to too much in terms of greenhouse gases. I mean, they do, but so that isn't really the driving force. But if we do switch to, what we really want to do is get people out of gas cars. And of course, as we move to electric cars, maybe that's even less of an issue too. So then what is going to drive it? Maybe it's the parking, the convenience. My joke is I get to downtown and I never have problems finding a place to park.
Well, and this kind of relates to a question that Sarah wrote in the chat here, I think. And I love that question that Sarah asked. If I understand it correctly, I'm reading it and listening to you all at the same time, and I'm not the best at multitasking. But I think she's essentially asking about this push and pull or an either or approach to getting people to change their behavior. Do you just do a top-down policy like, nope, this is how it's going to be, and then people have to change their behavior? Or do you go with like, let's, let people come to it and do some behavioral change, cultural change stuff? I think that was kind of what she was asking. And Gary, I think you're referring to some policy change, parking policy is an important, if we really want to change people's behavior, we can do that through parking policy. We can do it through pricing mechanisms and tax policy. If we don't want people to drive, we can make it really expensive. And we choose not to. So in answer to Sarah's question, I think if I understand Sarah's question correctly, both are important. We have to have the policy stuff to drive people's behavior. It just tends to be really hard. And that's where you all come in. You have to pressure your city council, your town council members to make these decisions. And you have to champion it with your neighbors when they complain about the fact that they can't find parking, or that the business complains that people can't, their businesses are going to be hurt because people can't park there. But I'll say one more thing on this, and that is, we operate again in 35 cities and towns. And when we're talking to different companies to try to get them involved in Bike to Work Day or whatever it may be, there's a huge difference in the attitude of companies based on where they're doing business. So when we talk to companies like LinkedIn or like Google, who are in North Bay Shore in Mountain View, they are operating, they got their development they got their entitlements under a policy rubric that requires that they get people out of cars. And if they don't, they can't do any more building out there. So there's an incentive for them to be working with their employees to get people to change their behavior. You contrast that with, and so those are very pleasant conversations. We talk with Google and LinkedIn, they're like, hey, help us figure out how to get more people riding bikes. And here, we want to support you to do these programs.
My goodness, they're motivated.
Right, we need your help. And they're motivated. I mean, they're good companies, and they're motivated because the city is telling them you have to do this. Contrast that when we're doing business, when we're talking with businesses in North San Jose. And there, the city of San Jose is desperate to get companies to locate there. And so they lower the transportation impact fees. If a company's like, I need another stoplight here to make it easier for cars to be going, the city's like, whatever you want. And there's no regulations that say, you know what, we really would like it if you could get your folks to be riding a bike. And so those conversations are a lot more difficult because those companies are like, why do I have to talk to the bike coalition? So policy matters, absolutely.
Yeah. So I hate to say it, but we're running out of time. Policy does matter, and that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. I know, for example, the Packer Foundation in downtown Los Altos, they were told they could only have so many parking places, and if you started parking on city streets, you're in big trouble. So they were motivated to get people to either work from home or ride a bike. And so it does work. So we're going to wrap it up. unless there's really one last burning question that you just can't wait and have to get an answer to. But please come back on Thursday. We're going to have the mission folks from Mission Trail tell us how they handle the waste these days, and maybe give us some insight on what are they doing with all that plastic, because the world has changed so much lately, and it'd be really a lot of fun to find out where all this is headed. And so Louis Pellegrini is going to be the main speaker, and he's always a delight to listen to. But anyway, as far as today goes, Shiloh, thank you so much. Appreciated it.
Absolutely.
Thumbs up.
Yeah, I left my email in the chat. Contact me. Would love to get, if any of you are interested in riding bikes or getting more involved, let me know. I suspect you all are already involved in your communities in the things that you love. But if you'd like to get involved in bike stuff, shoot me a note.
Will do. We'll stay in touch for sure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.